Lisa Stam, welcome to Legally Contented. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, Wayne. I am a lawyer that owns a virtual law firm, and I live in Toronto, and most of my lawyers are in around Ontario in Canada.
Lisa, thank you for joining us. You are our first international guest. No
Nice,
pressure.
exotic.
I'm sure you'll do just great. I want to talk to you about your practice. You launched SpringLaw, a virtual law firm, a few years back after spending time in big law. So we have that similar background. And it's clear to me that your blog, the Employment and Human Rights Law in Canada blog, has played a significant role in
Yes.
helping you build your book of business and your prominence and your authority early on that allowed you to take your firm or take your practice to your own firm and build it up from there. But talk to me a little bit about the early days of your legal career. You graduated law school in the early aughts. Tell me about the legal
Mhm.
market in Canada at that time, and then how you got into big law after law school graduation.
Sure. So I have been practicing since 2004, and it's 100 billion years ago because I did not have a cell phone, and I'm an early adapter techie nerd. I didn't have a cell phone until I was articling in Canada. So just after I finished my third year of law school, I got my first cell phone, a little mini flip one. So so it's the legal industry has changed so much. That's only 20 years ago, almost 19 years ago. So for my first couple of years, I worked at small union side boutiques in Toronto for the first 3 to 4 years. And then I switched over to Baker McKenzie, a big global law firm, and practiced there for about 7 years. And then I went out, my 10th year of practice, I went out on my own.
For those of us in the States, explain what articling is in
Yeah, it's
Canada.
like the intern year that you do. So you do your 3 years of law school, and then you do at that point it was 10 months of you're a student in a law firm. You know, you get paid. It's like an internship basically.
Did you have an entrepreneurial background? Was your family entrepreneurs? Because to leave the cozy confines of big law and go out on your own is in my mind a big deal. Any lawyer who goes out on their own or runs their own business, it's a big deal. But going from the warm, comfy confines of a firm like
Mhm.
Baker, where you just have, I mean, literally anything you could possibly need at your disposal, it's there for you. What got you thinking about going out on your own and launching a law firm?
You know, I have zero examples in my family. My dad's a truck driver for 60 years, like working class employee for all those years, a stay-at-home mom until I was 15. Like I don't know where it came from because my siblings all either work or married a farmer. Like I don't have this entrepreneurial family, but you know, by year, I don't know, early on, I would say even during articling. So like even at the very beginning, I loved going out to events and networking and getting out there and meeting people. And the hunt is exhilarating for me. I love getting out there and meeting new people and bringing clients in and helping. So I'm you know a real extrovert and love helping people, but I soon learned that I hate all that traditional type of networking. And, you know, that's how the blog entered. But in terms of going out on my own, um, by year 10, I was looking at how, first of all, when you're at a big global firm, you get priced out of your local market pretty quickly, right? So by that year of call for me, no local client would hire me anymore. So that becomes a problem. So I'm not going to bring in Google or Apple for a second. So if you want to build local clients, it's hard to do that at a big global firm, first of all. And then the other piece is how client delivery was happening and where money is being spent in a great big firm is great if you need the global footprint, but it's irrelevant to local clients. Local clients don't care if we have an office in Japan. They just don't care, and they don't care to pay for the the big fat salaries to fly everybody into a city and have these great big, deluxe meetings. It's great for the global clients, but there's not that many. I live in Canada. If anything, we're a satellite of a US company in the first place. So I still have a really global practice, but it looks very different than the associate work I was doing at Baker.
Have you been doing employment law since law school, since graduating and articling?
Yeah, I went into law school wanting to be a labor lawyer and do arbitrations for unions. And after a few years, I also really enjoyed the non-union workplace. So when I went to Baker, that became all employment law and administrative law type work. And then I like working with that owner operator who's got some skin in the game and freaking out about things and sometimes making really stupid decisions that I can reverse course quickly. He or she is not a cog in the machine. So I love working with that smaller owner operator client. So our firm only does employment law, employment, labor, human rights, the issues that arise out of the workplace.
Where did the interest in union come from? Is that from your dad and the truck driving?
Well, ironically, he was a union rep that hated unions. So I don't know. And like he voted for conservative populist government. So it's like a weird contradiction there. But I will never forget this one pivotal moment when I was in between my undergraduate degree and I took a couple of victory laps before I went to law school. And so I was working at the University of Toronto at that point, just doing an admin job. And the steelworkers came in to unionize their administrative people. And I was just curious. So I went to some of the meetings and I at that point didn't have any particularly big opinion one way or the other, but the process was really compelling to me. And I remember this one meeting where they were about to, sign up for the cars and get certified. And this lawyer walked into the room. And it was all these employees sitting around. And this lawyer walked in and she was like this queen bee with all the union people and all her posse people coming in. And she had all the answers. And I just instantly said, I want that job. That is like, she just knew the whole process and was just giving comfort to all these people in the room. And it's what made me, I was sort of going back and forth between a couple of different career options at that point. And I just forget it. I'm just going to get into law school. So the next year I went to law school and did all the labor courses that I could take and have never looked back. I still love labor.
When did you learn at Baker, based on the timeline here, you got started with the blog, which we'll obviously dive into in a moment. You got started with that as an associate at Baker. So how did you know that content marketing, thought leadership marketing, any marketing was going to be necessary as part of your growth and part of your practice development? Because I know as an associate at Decker, when I was there from 2010 through 2016, there was not much marketing that was asked of the attorneys. Occasionally we had client alerts, but really the associates, the juniors, the mids, and even the senior associates, it was not our priority and we were not prioritized to do it. We were incentivized to keep billing hours, hit those hour targets, and then get your bonuses because of it. And I don't recall much of a business development marketing mindset that was pounded into us early on. And I'm curious, how did you know at the prototypical large global law firm that it was time for you to start thinking about how to grow your practice and your business aside from just getting work from the partners above you?
Yeah. And from the network, right? I mean, I think in big law, especially these global firms, you're taught how to get that low hanging fruit from other offices to really network with other offices. And I just to me, that just seems so dumb. You're fighting against your colleagues, right? To win work internally. I mean, if they've got Canadian employment law, it should just come into our group and be distributed to the person who's the right person at the right billing rate and has capacity. None of that made any sense to me. I think it's because I was at two small firms for my first 4 years that you just have to pound the pavement when you're at a small firm. It's not an option. One really great mentor that over the years has always been a really great mentor. She was my principal during articling, so she was the person that was assigned to me to help me, and she she was great at it, and just was out there unabashedly a woman about all of it. She didn't at all care about all the traditional types of marketing. She just did what she enjoyed doing, and continues to have a really big book of business. So she was always, Nancy Shapiro is her name. She's always been a really big influence for me on a really neat way to carve out the life you want as a lawyer. I went to law school at 29. So because I was busy doing medieval history in my undergrad. So you got to like take a few extra steps to get into
That's
law.
a separate podcast. That's not this podcast. I'm sorry.
Weird backgrounds and why people end up going to law school. But so I was 29. So I started having my kids earlier in my practice. So I was, 37 and 39 when I had my two kids. So I'm at that point, I'm in my, fourth, fifth, sixth year of practice. And so you just have to do your time differently. You have to deal with your time. So when I came back from one of my mat leaves, one of the lawyers sat me down and said, okay, you need to think about what focus you want. Because I always initiated these conversations. I loved business development and how do we get more work. And so he gave me the great advice. You need to figure out what your niche is. So I went off and there's a billion employment lawyers. So why is anyone going to come to me? And so I remember the list on a piece of paper that I hand wrote and figured out what I'd like to do. And I really have always been a bit of a nerd and like technology. And at that point, this is, 2005, 6, 7, Facebook is just coming out. Twitter is just coming out. And the issues about how that's going to impact the workplace. I thought that would be a really interesting place that I would really enjoy. And so I decided tech in the workplace was going to be my thing. And so as I was looking that up, I tripped across LexBlog and learned a bit more about that. And then I signed up and started my own blog with them. And because it also synced up nicely with an area specialty that I wanted, because then I'd be in the trenches doing the stuff that I would be advising on. So for me, it was almost a tactical exercise to get in the trenches and learn. I mean, at that point, you're advising clients who don't understand that the wall on Facebook isn't what the owner did, right? Somebody else wrote on their wall. So I'd get, employers would be all upset that their employee is writing crap on their Facebook. And I'd have to explain, well, that's their wall. And here's what a wall is on Facebook. And I mean, all the words have changed since then. Yeah. But early on, there was just so much unknown about all these brand new platforms. And it's so hard for a new lawyer now who was born 20 years after me to understand how much the world has changed in such a short period of time.
I always like reading the case law from the late 90s into the early aughts. You see just the way that the word internet is capitalized, or the footnotes that explain what the World Wide Web is, or what a website is. It takes you back to a period of time where, just like now, but back then, there were these new technologies and new concerns and legal issues that judges had no idea how to deal with, right? Like, of all people, there were future-facing technologists who had no idea what to do with the technology, and you had judges trying to work their way through it, fed to them briefs and arguments from lawyers who didn't know what to do with technology themselves. When you started ramping up the blog, what was your plan? Did you have to go through management at the firm because you were then an associate? How did that work? And what was your kind of early view of what the blog would do and the time it would take you to actually blog and make a meaningful effort?
Yeah. So, I mean, this does show how much of the olden days it was. So when I started up the blog, I'm lucky that I tripped upon LexBlog and signed up with them. So back then, blogging was so new that they had training. They would teach you. So I got some very early training from some excellent people who were really pioneers in the field, and so learned, how to identify who your audience is, who you're talking to, and they really helped me shape, what the name of my blog is. I mean, the fact that I have the URL of what I do shows how early my blog is. I try to capture all of Canada employment and human rights law in one blog. And you couldn't do that now because it's just such a noisy space. But when I first started, so I started in the fall of 2008, just looking into it. And then in 2009, when it was ready to go live, I did talk to the head of my group at Baker, and he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Nice initiative, but we don't have a social media policy yet. I mean, I think some of the earlier questions were, tell me more about what a blog is and like what's all involved here. And then I talked to the managing partner at the time, who, and both of them ultimately were very supportive. So but it was all so new. And so and then the colors I had chosen were, and I was not trying to do branding of the firm at all. It was my own little thing, but it was like a little too close. I mean, there's only so many colors to pick from. So I rebranded it so that it would look very different. Just picked very different colors. And then they wanted to wait for the social media policy to come down. And I'm like, here's the link. Here's a few articles, and they want conversations about should they be vetting my content. I'm like, you send me out to speaking gigs by myself. No one is vetting that. You can just go anytime you want onto the internet and read my blog, and then I'll take down whatever you want. It's all pretty generic, regular employment law. I have no politics here. I'm not going to be anti or pro anything. I'm just going to do, and then of course early on, lots of concerns about giving away intellectual capital and people, relying on any of these blog articles as legal advice, and what exposure could go back to the firm on that. So some of the conversations involved me having zero identifying factors anywhere of what law firm I work for. So in the early days, there was like no identifying. So not only the colors, but I had to, and I don't even think I included that, but that meant I put my personal email on there instead of my firm email. And in hindsight, I bet you they don't do that now, because that meant I paid for it all myself. It was all completely mine. So that is my IP. I did it off hours. I didn't do it on the firm's computer system. I was really careful to do all that. But had they shown a bit more enthusiasm, then I probably might have like pulled it in sooner. So when I left, they actually then started up a blog, and someone in the firm with the same company, very similar. So, the group does have a blog, but it was only after I left. But again, that doesn't speak so much to the firm. It just speaks to how early it all got set up, and them needing to have a global policy on this before some local little satellite office in Canada starts something up. I mean, that's just the nature of great big global law firms too. Things move a bit slowly.
We'll touch on this in a moment more, but you had the good fortune of them being so terrified, scared, apprehensive, whatever word you want to use here, that they let you run the show with the blog, which I would assume helped with its portability when you said, adios, time for me to do my own thing. Imagine the negotiations if you didn't have that good fortune to have to go through those questions and answer sessions about your blog. Because I would assume today that there are conversations where an attorney is going to lateral, and maybe you deal with this at SpringLaw, where I have a blog and I have maybe a podcast through the firm, and I've gotten clients who know me as an attorney at that firm, but I'm going to this other firm, and I'm taking my email list and I'm taking my blog with me, and we have to negotiate that because I'm sure there's a price to pay. We can cover that, I guess, more in a moment. Let's talk about, though, the kind of intersection here between your content marketing efforts and you launching SpringLaw. Did you get business and clients from the blog that allowed you to say, you know what, I've got something here in terms of a way to bring in clients, and I have this budding book of business that will allow me to lateral? Mm-hmm. What was the overlap of the two? Because as we just said, you took the blog with you when you left to start SpringLaw. So what was the timeline there and the overlap?
Yeah. I mean, when I was leaving, I think it was totally off the radar in the first place. I think it was still, this was in 2014, because I left in 2014 and started my first firm with a partner. And then we went our separate ways 3 years later. So I started this firm, SpringLaw, that I'm in now, in 2017. But in 2014, when I left, it was still kind of, I don't think there was any concerns that I was stealing any clients or taking any IP, because I think it was just assumed that's my cute little side project, so who cares? But I had a ton of subscribers and my SEO, because I was able to start it so early. And I was there's two of us that, two employment lawyers here in the city. We're one of that we keep regular touch in, and we joke about how we're like the first two employment lawyers in the city to do Twitter. And that's when there just wasn't and we like didn't have many people to tweet with because, so we joke about how there wasn't much to share yet. But because I got onto these platforms early, my SEO has always been really strong. And so even if you don't have a ton of subscribers or a ton of sometimes it's very hard to show that direct line from a post to a client, right? Almost always it's more about your SEO and how much of that will then establish that you're legit, and then move them over to your website. And so when I first started, my website had zero SEO. So we really put the blog up front and posted there first. For example, all of our social feeds are Twitter, especially, it's less so now, but early on, that was the engine that drove the internet and drove content. So anytime I would blog, I would of course put it on Twitter, and that's what drove people to the blog. And because I am on Lex blog, when they tweet, it goes to like hundreds of thousands of eyeballs. And so that all of that just built this incremental and exponential growth on SEO behind the scenes. And that's, I think, how you get clients and build profile, and just be seen in the market. It's your SEO more than anything else.
How did you approach the content that you were publishing? Because there's two schools of thought here. And employment law, I think, is a particularly interesting example of this, where there is theoretically breaking news frequently, whether it's the NL, at least in the States, the NLRB, there is private litigation, there's new statutes coming out, new rules and regulations coming out from regulators. But you have to balance the newscasting with the analysis. And how did you approach that? Where I could imagine early on, the newscasting is helpful. There's not many, if not any other people who are blogging. So you can become the trusted kind of news source for these issues. But at a certain time or a certain point in time, you have to start providing some analysis, not legal analysis, but some kind of analysis.
I know, yeah.
Because you have to be able to show the audience that, look, not only can I report the news and copy and paste links to the regulations being proposed, but I can actually give you food for thought regarding what to do now these regulations might be coming online. So how'd you balance the news and the analysis?
Yeah, and that's the whole thought leader piece, right? And how do you become a thought leader in your space? So I did follow, and probably more than I do right now, but especially in my early years, if there was any sort of big scandal or some juicy heading that it was in a workplace, I would use that as a jumping board into sharing some best practices about some basic employment law pieces. So I was very careful and continue to be careful about never giving out legal advice, but I think it's always fine to give tips and best practices. It is a matter of having a collection of evergreen content sitting there so that in weeks when you're just too busy, you can always post. So in my early years, I really tried to always post 3 times a month, a minimum of 3 times. That gave me my buffer. So weekly is ideal, but for my area of law, at least, and I know there's all kinds of different schools of thought on this, but I couldn't do more than that. So I've always aimed to do about 1 a week. And then I gave myself a bit of grace when it got busy, but try to have some evergreen content sitting there that's good forever. And then doing the fun in the moment type posts, but especially in your early years. And then for me, you go off and start having kids. And I've always worked very full time in between all that. So it's, I'm pretty strategic about it, and I try hard to not have posts that are much more than about 500 to 750 words, lots of headings, I all of it that still probably goes back to that early training I got on how people like to read these things. So a blog post shouldn't take 5 hours, it in and out. I mean, and we can talk about Chat GPT in a bit as well, but it should take way less because of that now. But it is a matter of having some evergreen content sitting there, and then it doesn't need to be the hits. When we take a look at what the most popular blog posts are, it's not necessarily the newscasting type of things. It's, like, how do I fire someone? How do I, it's really basic what people are Googling, questions that they Google that they trip on that article.
How did you balance writing your blog posts with motherhood, with being initially an associate and now running your own firm, which I'm willing to bet there's more time spent running the firm than there is as an associate. But
Mm-hmm.
did you have a schedule where you said every morning I'm going to bang out this post from 8 a.m. to 9 o'clock? Or was this late at night when the kids went to bed? How did you balance it? Because I think a lot of people that get thought leadership wrong, they get content marketing wrong. They get it wrong because they don't give it enough time. It has to be a consistent effort. And the way that
Yeah.
it's consistent is to set aside in your calendar somehow, nights, weekends, mornings, you have to build it in. Otherwise, that video won't get recorded, that blog post won't get written, that podcast won't get recorded. You've got to build it into your efforts, just part of your business life or your personal life. So how did you, with everything you had going on inside the office and out, how did you find ways to squeeze even 500 words, 750
Mm-hmm.
words? It still takes time.
It does. Yeah, no, it does. I think because early on, first of all, I enjoy business development. I'm pretty good at it, but also early on, I saw that blogging is way more efficient. I can do it in between everything. The alternative is going to another golf tournament that eats up all of Saturday, or, another cocktail party where you hate everybody in the room. I don't know. I just found it way more efficient to hammer out a 1 hour blog post than going that's the drive just to the golf tournament, right? And so I just, if people say they don't have time to blog, then they're not doing anything then, because how can you not have time to blog? It's actually the most efficient thing to do. And now the bigger challenge is, how do you make sure that it gets read, right? I think early on it was easier to do that. I had that nice head start. But in terms of business development, certainly if anyone wants to run their own firm, you just have to do this. You just have to have content out there. It has to be content marketing. I remember having this conversation when I was at the big firm around, there'd be a ton of time spent having client webinars or not webinars, client sessions. And there was a really big emphasis and value and importance put on doing it always in person, having them come into the office and getting bums in seats. You'd hear that all the time. And so you'd have the whole marketing department involved. You'd had a couple of associates doing the slide deck. You'd have all the partners vetting it and reviewing it, and then going back, like the amount of time, and then all the invites, and then ordering the time that goes into getting maybe 40 people show up back in, 2008, 9, 10. And then these people probably not being any sort of decision maker, they're just looking for a morning off, to come and hang out. And I showed the head of the group at that point, here's one blog post I did in X number of, an hour and a half, let's say. I tweeted it out, but 5 or 6 other people tweeted it. And I wrote down the number of eyeballs that would have seen that tweet about my blog post. And it was something like 14,000. I mean, I lucked out that day because I had a couple of people that had really big followings tweeted out. So I had that many people look at one blog post, and it took me an hour of work versus all the time it took to get maybe 3, mostly not decision makers, come into the firm. And to me, it's just, it just made no sense to me. It's good public speaking for juniors maybe, but I don't know. None of that made, and these are existing clients, first of all. So why aren't we out in the industries getting new clients? So content is just such a much more efficient way to market.
You hit on so many great points. One, to this last point you just made, that content allows you to clone yourself. You can't do that yet through science, but content you can. Your blog posts, your YouTube videos, your podcast episodes, your social media posts are working for you 24/7, 365. They are your salespeople, your advocates. They are working for you while you are running errands, going to the gym, out walking the dog, in the shower, doing this, you name it. They're always out there working for you. And they are the modern equivalent of previous on-stage speaking engagements. If you think about the webinars that you're doing that we'll cover in a moment that you post on YouTube, if you're getting a couple hundred people viewing those webinars, well, that's the equivalent of what, 4 100 kind of seat presentations or
Yeah.
8 50-seat presentations. People wait all year to present at a conference where there's 30 people in the room. But if they did a YouTube video where they put a webinar on, they post it online, that can be seen and repurposed, but it can be seen by thousands of people more than once a year. So when you have the older
Yeah.
attorneys talk about, well, gee, why would you want to do YouTube videos? Why not speak at conferences? Well, yeah, they have a point, but guess what?
Mhm.
The videos have a whole different lifespan, have a whole different purpose, and are always working for you 24/7, 365. Another point too about the efficiency of content. Regardless if you're a business to business or you're even a business to client, a direct to client type consumer law firm, your content can answer clients' questions and
Yeah.
save
Yeah.
you the hassle
Mhm.
from when you are having a consultation with a new client, or when something comes
Yeah.
out, some new regulation or law is passed, and you've got 15 clients wanting to talk to you for 15 minutes each. Well, guess what? Write a blog post or a series or record a webinar.
Yeah.
And now in an hour, you've saved yourself more than that in terms of probably non-billable client time. And you
Yeah.
have a piece of content that can be used for your marketing and business development efforts aside from the client service aspect. So yeah, content is this
Yeah.
amazing thing when you think about it. You think about what it does for you and the relatively small investment that you have to make into it
Mhm.
on a consistent basis. The payout is
Yeah.
just so huge.
It's incomparable to in-person speaking for sure. I mean, I think of it as one great big flywheel, right? That takes a bit to get going, but once you get it going and you just feed it a little bit, and I think a once a week is fine for law blogs. Yeah, I think that's plenty. And I try and bundle them. I don't always get to this, but the idea, stack it, just pick one day and write 3 or 4 of them. Or if you find your topic is getting longer, then split it up into a couple of parts, and now you have 3 weeks of blogs. If you split it into three. So I did it all myself for the first few years. When I started SpringLaw, I mean, a little bit the last firm, but that one we didn't really, it was just the two of us and another lawyer for a little bit, but we didn't really grow all that much. But when I started SpringLaw on my own, we've grown aggressively since 2017. And so how we do it now as a team. So, for your listeners who are just starting out on their own, yeah, there's work, right? There's work for this flywheel. But if once you start growing, I really want to approach our marketing from a collective point of view. If we all do a little bit, we can collectively amplify each other. So I spent a lot of time thinking through, how do I amplify all of the voices in my firm? Because I don't want it to be the Lisa Stam show. The firm is named SpringLaw. It's not, it's all of us together collectively doing this. So over time, the time commitment around blogging will start to taper off as you grow and you have other lawyers on the team that can, and our paralegals also write, so we've got this team of people. And so now you're writing a blog post maybe once every 8 weeks. That's fine. And then the other thing as you grow is that you just need to spit out an article and then you hand it over to someone else to edit it, to put it, to post it, to tweet about it, to get it out there, and then hopefully syndicate it, right? So from early on, I've tried hard to find other places that will publish my blog post, because then you really start to have that exponential impact.
Have you built a marketing and business development culture into SpringLaw? And what do you see in terms of the people that are there, the other attorneys, the staff? Because there are some firms where they make content marketing part of the task of what you do as an associate. You are going to write for the blog, to your point, a couple times a month, maybe based on the number of attorneys and the frequency of blog posts, but it is a part of the culture of those firms. And that's just how it is. And then other firms have the rainmakers who are the ones creating the content and leading the show. And they don't have much of an expectation for their colleagues to do anything because they are bringing in the cash, they're bringing in the clients, and all is good, at least at that moment. So how have you balanced building a virtual firm, presumably in your likeness, because you want to build the kind of firm you want to work for? So you build this firm
Yeah.
with all of these values and cultural aspects. When it comes to marketing and business development, what are you expecting out of your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, our firm culture, the number one value that we have internally is a growth mindset and innovative. But number two is collaborative. I everything needs to be collaborative in our firm. No silos. We help each other. We collectively amplify each other. So the marketing piece, really, we all share. Everybody on the team, every lawyer is expected to post. And as we keep growing, it gets less and less. So that's easier. And then we have a monthly webinar, and everyone takes their turn on that as well. So there is, I think some people just love it more than others. You will never get away from that. And some people are better at it than others. I always think of all of this as just, how do I reach more people to help them? I really believe in how we're delivering our legal services and all our innovative stuff, and really reverse engineering the whole experience so that everyone has just a very different client journey at our firm. I love talking about it. So I've never seen it as sales or trying to upsell anyone. If anything, I try and downsell people because I don't want them to be spending more than they can. And so we do have lots of conversations about this, and it is written into everyone's contract that they are to participate in the firm's blog and webinars, those two things in particular. And I haven't had any pushback. I mean, not to my face at least, but I mean, because the alternative is, again, that they go out there and do all this pounding the pavement inefficiently. And this allows people to get their own profile online. They take it with them when they leave the firm, right? It's these are all individual opportunities too. So I haven't actually had any pushback, because I don't know, maybe I hope because I'm conveying all the benefits of just doing this in a collective way within a firm.
Well, and I think it's good luck for an attorney who is entrepreneurial to work for another entrepreneurial attorney, because to come into a firm where the managing partner, the other equity partners, whoever is at the top, are not threatened by an associate who wants to build their book of business and understands, because that managing partner, that co-owner was there once, that they're willing to hustle and balance the billable hour with the non-billable marketing efforts. That's probably an attorney that you want to keep happy, because they see the bigger picture beyond the 1,900 or 2,200 hours a year of billable time.
It's Canada. We don't do that here, just so you know. It's not 1,900 hours.
So I guess there's a US to Canadian hour conversion. That's well less than the usual big law here.
Well, here's a big difference. I have two lawyers right now on a mat leave, and they're taking 18 months each, because that's what they're allowed to do in Canada. Yeah. And when they come back, I will have a place for them, and we'll all just keep right on marching. It's a very different, that leaves and target and all that all looks a bit different for sure.
I mean, you didn't say 18 weeks, you said 18 months.
Months. Yeah.
How has the firm grown since you left the other firm and launched it, 6 years ago? Because you've grown greatly in size. I'm assuming your marketing efforts have grown as well as the firm has matured. So what are some of the numbers in terms of the staff to give us a sense of the growth? And then how has the marketing and business development efforts, what have they been that have been successful to help you grow to where you are today?
Yeah. And so those things go hand in hand, right? The growth and the marketing, one feeds the other for sure. So I started in 6 years ago on April 1. So we just had our 6-year anniversary. So I started with myself and an assistant. And we now have 9 lawyers and 2 paralegals and 3 operational. And we're currently recruiting for a marketing manager. So to bring that all in-house. So the way that we market does, and I haven't done any paid ads. Hardly. We dabbled a little bit once to see what Facebook ads would look like, but I haven't done any paid ads. It's all just put a blog post out once a week and share it like crazy all the time. And then do our once a month webinar and share that like crazy all the time. And then actually what we do, the third thing we do is we all of our blog posts, we compile into one monthly newsletter and send that out to our subscribers. And then it includes a few other things. But those are the 3 main efforts we do, all in-house. And so feedback we often get in our local market here is that people see what we're doing. We're quite visible. And so when you're recruiting for a new lawyer, people already have the sense that they want to work here, or they can vet that they don't want to work here, I guess. But they already know who we are, because we're all over the place on the, especially in the local market. So I do think that thought leadership and being strategic about what you're putting out there, and then and how much, right? I'm a real numbers person, so I track it all. I it's a deliberate schedule. I've done a bit of research over the years around when is the best time to post, when, all that stuff, and just pick a version and go for a while. And so for us, we just, every Wednesday morning we post, um and because there's just lots of traction out there, it helps with our recruiting in the same way that it helps with bringing in clients, but it definitely helps with recruiting people coming in.
And that's a great point. A benefit to thought leadership and content marketing is you become
Yeah.
more visible in front of your target audiences, including possible new lateral attorneys, new staff members, new business folks on the marketing or administrative side. And when you get into content that is talking about the practice of law and your
Yeah.
vision for a virtual law firm and the practice of law in 2023 and 2033, that's the kind of thought leadership that really can win people over, because they can look at a half dozen different job ads and everyone's going to say the same, a culture of collegiality, blah, blah, blah. It's all there, especially law
Client
firms.
first.
Client first, collegial, we high values about all that stuff. But when they actually see the managing partner writing about things concerning culture, and maybe they see photos on Instagram or in other social media platforms, they get a sense of what the firm stands for beyond what it says in the job ads, that could be very persuasive. And again, content is the Swiss Army knife, and one of the things it could do is help you with your recruiting efforts. 2017 was not too long ago, but it was pre-COVID, and people looked at virtual law firms differently than they do today. Did you have any pushback from clients, from referral sources, from mentors, or people who you were talking to about SpringLaw in terms of them saying, why the hell would you do this? Obviously, your clients want to come into your office, have Lifesaver mints, and have some cheap coffee and chat with you. How could you have a virtual law firm?
Yeah. Well, look, so I did have a firm prior for 3 years, and one of the big reasons we decided to go our separate ways was her concern that people wouldn't think we had a real law firm. And I just, I was doing a bit of a digital purge over the last few months, and I ran across some articles from like 2011, 12 about VLOs. We don't call it that anymore, but virtual law offices. It's just been, I don't know. I'm also a huge Star Trek fan. Maybe this is all like just all fits in, but it never made sense to me. You do not need bricks and mortar to become a real law firm. That never made sense to me. And frankly, when you're in a great big global law firm, you never see your clients. They're down in California or Texas or Japan. And so that whole bricks and mortar and spending all this money on renovations in very high cost buildings in central, in the financial district, none of that ever made any sense to me at all. And so, I did set out in 2017. I went off, and for anyone with little kids, this is how you do this. You go find, especially, you don't have money when when a firm breaks down and you start another one. So I went to a pretty shitty hotel near my house and that was super cheap, and just stayed there for 3 nights. The only thing I needed was Wi-Fi and a desk in the room, and a little bit of a gym downstairs to burn off the stress. But it was, in not a great area of town here. But I just went and set up a war room, and I created a firm in 3 days. I had no distractions, no little kids. My husband's great. He was very supportive of all this, and frankly was happy to get me out of the house, because I was losing it from my other firm just not working anymore. And so I still have, like the little Post-it note where I mapped out what my departments would be, and then I've kept these 2 pieces of paper because I'm otherwise entirely paperless. But this other is on a piece of graph paper where I mapped out what software would talk to each other so that I could be entirely in the cloud and grow a virtual law firm. From minute one, I really want it to be virtual. And so but I was very deliberate about all of it. It's virtual first. We never meet clients in person unless it's litigation. And if you have to go to we call it discoveries or depositions or trials, like all of that obviously is mostly in person, although even that has changed since COVID. But otherwise, if a client insists on meeting with us in person, we refer them out and we don't keep them. And so over the years, especially pre-COVID, right? There was 3 years of pre-COVID where we were fully virtual. I'd say 3 or 4, and not to stereotype, but it was our employee side, people coming in that were not comfortable with technology. So probably older, very stressed out, worried they lost their job. And so I would refer them to someone else. But honestly, I can only think of one off the top of my head, but there must have been 2 or 3. The upside is that there was a ton of clients we've been able to service all over Canada because we're set up for it. We were doing videos from day one. Everything's up in the cloud. So all of our client ID and all our Law Society obligations, we just thought through all of that to do it all entirely virtual. And then equally important, why we've been able to grow is also really, really spending a ton of time thinking through how do we create a cohesive, fun firm culture in a virtual environment. So we're on the Google platform, for example, instead of any sort of Microsoft stuff, which I know that has evolved a bit, but in 2017, incomparable. And so, we have all kinds of chat rooms and all the stuff that's kind of normal now, but that was unique in 2017 and really a huge part of growing a virtual culture where we all still know each other well.
Let's hit on that for a second, because there might be some people listening or watching who say, wait a second, Lisa, what does the culture of the firm have to do with, you said growth of the firm? You are out there with the webinars, with the videos, with the blog, maybe doing some face-to-face meetings and other kind of community events. You're doing all of this, but yet you are saying that the culture helps the law firm grow. What's the connection between the two?
I hate turnover. It's so expensive to hire and invest and train a lawyer. It's so expensive. And so anyone who's starting out and about to hire the first lawyer, I'm sure you're freaking out about that incredible salary that you've got to put on the table. And it's going to be 3 or 4 months before they even come close. Well, before you can even start billing too much for them, let alone breaking even. And so it's a huge investment. So we spend a ton of time on training. We have a really elaborate training process. We've got the spreadsheet where we map out and everyone does a one-on-one with the new person first of all, just to get to know them. But, we pull in all the stops for all the training. I want people to really embed very quickly and feel very much part of the team. And I think in a virtual environment, you can't rely on osmosis and you can't rely on people sort of running into each other at the kitchen. So our mentoring is very deliberate. I've got a fantastic senior level associate now set up as the practice lead who mentors all the junior lawyers. I'm starting to build the layers in because, and so he meets with them one-on-one every week to just go through whatever files they may need to talk about. I meet with everyone once a month to talk through their KPIs and, their target staff. Everyone meets with their own paralegal once a week to go through their files. We have all these, and then we have a weekly all team mandatory meeting where we all get together on a video call to just ask any questions we have of each other on some really hard to crack strategy on files. And so everyone's sort of in the loop and, we've built out all these systems, very deliberate about regular touch points and video as often as possible. Almost always. I can't remember the last time we have a soft phone. We use RingCentral. I can't remember the last time I've phoned someone in the firm. It's always video. And frankly, that's faster. It's in Google, you click one little button, you throw in the icon and then they just know I'm calling them, right? That's sort of our culture. And if they can take it, they take it. If they can't, they just say, sorry, I'm on a call and we'll chat later. So it's in the same way that now you would have the audacity to phone people and interrupt their schedule, which increasingly feels weird. We just do that with videos instead. And so there's, I don't know, like this, you and I haven't met in person, but we see each other, we see each other's expressions. You see how much I use my hands when I talk, it's the video really can do 95% of what we need.
If you're open to video building rapport, it can build rapport, right? If you go into it as a stone cold person who doesn't want to show any emotion, doesn't want to ask the other person about what's going on, if you let it be this kind of sterile environment, that's what it'll be. If you want to be a
Yeah.
pleasant, warm, inviting environment, then you treat the person that you're talking to like an old friend, and you have a conversation, and the conversation happens, and you almost forget it's a business call because there's
Yeah.
face-to-face talk, about the family and what's going on outside the office, inside the office.
And there's so much more of that post-COVID now, right? I mean, it was somewhat unique pre-COVID, but it's not now. And I also think all these, whether it's Slack or Google Chat or whatever, those chat channels can really go a long way. We've got our main water cooler one. Everyone checks in and puts in jokes and wishes each other happy birthday and pictures from their vacation and constant pictures of our pets and, making it fun still and all the same things. Now, I do have to say, we do meet in person 4 times a year. So and this is written into everyone's contract. So we have an overnight retreat early in the year where we do planning for the year, and everyone, whether you're operational or an attorney, everyone shows up for that. This year we rented a big Airbnb in the countryside and stayed in this giant awesome house and did a whole bunch of strategy planning and brought in a chef the one night for cooking. And so we do get together in person there, and then we have a quarterly meetup, in a 1-day quarterly meetup where we do some strategy planning, lots of tech tips, and what are some pain points in our virtual firm? Are we all labeling things correctly? Like all those tactical points. So we are fully virtual, and we deliver our legal services only virtually, but we still do meet in person 4 times a year.
As we start to wrap up here, I'm very curious. You standing, kind of looking into over the horizon in 2017, as SpringLaw is as you emerge from that war room in the hotel, with the notes that you'll save for the 25th
Yeah.
anniversary,
Yeah.
special hardbound edition book. As you stepped out of that hotel room and you look kind of over the horizon, did you see this law firm? Did you see SpringLaw as it exists today back then?
It's definitely iterated, and obviously I didn't see that the whole pandemic would come forward. And so the downside of the many downsides of the pandemic, from a business point of view, the downside is that our infrastructure isn't such a differentiator anymore, right? Everyone does a whole bunch of online stuff, but because I think what we do now that I had really envisioned from minute one was that we had these integrated legal services where it's a combination of legal services and legal product, and really marrying those two together. So that, and having a proper e-commerce functionality on our law firm website, all of that is still relatively new, especially in Canada, less so in the States where the market's just 10 times bigger. But it's still, we have a pretty conservative law society infrastructure up here, and a pretty risk unfriendly universe around law still. And so all of that is fairly unique. And so I'm happy that, in 2017, that is where I hoped we would be now. I didn't anticipate that we would have so much services though. We've grown more than I anticipated, which is a nice problem. But we've just, again, the content, we just have this constant flow of work coming in. And the last time I looked, it's been a few months, a good 50% of the clients coming in the door are somehow coming to us online. It could be that they know somebody and they said, oh, hey, I've heard of this firm, or I've seen their neat stuff, check them out. Or it's someone saying, someone's brother or sister is saying, hey, I know so-and-so at SpringLaw, go check them out. But that the law firm and all our content is the filter that so many people go through first before they decide to hire us, like a huge percentage.
And unfortunately, we don't have time to get into all of the products that that are on your website. But that is, talk about bleeding edge. That is bleeding edge legal services. Courses and online programs have been around for 10, 15, 20 years, but in the legal space, they're still relatively new, and they're amazing because the DIYers out there who might want to handle their severance agreement or some other negotiation themselves can buy a playbook from a firm like yours, pay $200, $300, whatever they feel is a proper amount. And then if it doesn't work out, well, they can still come to you, and either you credit them that price toward the retainer, or they have a different kind of package that they could purchase from you. But the idea that they that not every client is going to want to go right to a consultation and right to a retainer agreement and start working with you. As they figure out what they're going to do, they might say, hey, you know what? I've read all your stuff. I read all the stuff online. I think I can do this. I just need some help, and I
Yeah.
need help at a lower rate than it would cost me if you were there riding shotgun with me for 15 hours.
Well, and it gives this huge head start, right? And then they're working off of our templates, which means we can jump in way faster instead of trying to fix something that's super behind. So it gives that huge head start. And that's the integrated piece of it that I think that, you know, we really are cutting out a fairly unique approach to this, where we want people to use, you know, go get the template 24/7 yourself, and then when you want a final vetting or a bit of customizing, or you got some unique or weird thing that you want to add in there, then we just do that corner. I mean, it's a version of unbundling essentially, but we are offering up for that, you know, that lower price, the product first, and then they can add the services on top to integrate, and then get the legal solution with that combination of those two things.
Lisa, I want to leave our audience with two pieces of advice directly from you. The first is, what advice would you give lawyers who are contemplating going out on their own to launch their own firm?
Get content out there. Anything. It doesn't, and there's no wrong answer. Just go write stuff. Get and probably more video than anything else. Start up a TikTok channel and make it authentic, unpolished, and just get out there, and then hire a good bookkeeper for sure. Like, number one, hire a bookkeeper from minute one.
No seclusion in a hotel room for.
Oh yeah, we do the war room, and you know what? If you've got little kids, 100%, you can just be freed up of the dinner hour and the witching hour right after that, and just go and spend 48 hours of doing nothing. Let your OCD kick in, and you'll move so fast. You know, I hit a grocery store on the way and have all kinds of healthy stuff, like no junk food. It's you know, it's a hardcore, and I do it a couple times a year still. I love it. I move things along so quickly when I do that.
So if you see Lisa ahead of you in the store with a whole bunch of beef jerky and alkaline water and granola, you know where she's going. And
Exactly.
she's by herself. And the last piece of advice, it's probably similar for attorneys or in-house legal marketers who are looking to get into the content game, whether it's blogs, videos, podcasts, whatever. Based on your experience and the benefits you've seen from it, what's your advice to them?
Just look at numbers, I would say. So, you know, a very big purpose of all of this online content needs to be SEO and getting in front of people. Advice that I heard early on from the LexBlog folks is, don't write something and then go say it in a cornfield. You need to go where all the people are, right? And so figure out where your audience is, and what they're reading and what they're listening to, what they're watching, and go there and pick one of the 4 billion platforms that are available. Probably at this point, I would, if one is starting brand new, it probably wouldn't hurt to hire someone to especially help with that under the hood technical piece around how to get the best eyeballs, which hashtags to use. But if money is, I mean, for in-house marketing, there would be a budget for this. But if you're a person about to start up your own shop and there is no budget yet, just go make a whole bunch of mistakes and try. There's no wrong way to do this. Just go say stuff. Try not to be too much of a jerk about it all. That's probably the only rule, is don't, you know, alienate too many people, but have opinions and get out there and speak your mind. But increasingly, the tech under the hood SEO stuff, I think, is important.
Thank you. And I'm sure there are many attorneys out there who would agree that when you've got a client base that is looking for people like you, looking for lawyers and law firms like yours, Google, perhaps Bing now with its AI integration, might be the first place they go.
Yep.
And they're gonna find, and they're gonna go to the firms that are at the top, that are providing informative content that educates them and communicates to that potential client that this law firm knows what the hell they're talking about. So call us or email us, because we've just proven to you in this blog post or series of posts or podcasts or videos that we know what we're talking about.
And they get to know you, right? From day one, we've tried, and I, you know, coach everyone on the team, have a very informal voice. Don't do all those dumb case law updates. No one cares. Like identify the case, but then talk about why we should all care about it, and in plain English, and talk to your audience. If you're talking to other lawyers, fine, but that's not who most lawyers should be talking to. We're talking to our clients.
Lisa, thank you for all of your insights and your advice here. Where can listeners, viewers learn more about you?
Everywhere. So our website is springlaw.ca. So that's really our central station. So come there for sure. I'm on Twitter. We have a new TikTok channel that we started up in the late fall, jumped on board with that. All of it is either Spring Law Firm or under my own name, Lisa Stam. So my Twitter account I've had for a billion years, and that's all those handles are all either Lisa Stam or Spring Law.
Lisa, thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the continued growth and empire building that you're doing at SpringLaw.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for having me.